How's it going, guys? How we
Hello,
doing?
hello. Okay.
Welcome back, y'all.
Welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah. What do we got for us today?
What do we got for us today? The topic that we're going to talk about
Yeah.
or
Well, let's catch up a little
Yeah,
bit.
let's do that first.
We've
Let's do
had a
that
couple of
first.
eventful past few weeks.
All right, so tell me about your eventful past week.
Let's see. Let me dig back. 2 weekends ago, I went to San Francisco with the bar team. We went to True Laurel, which was doing a pop up with Martinis, which is a bar in New York.
Pop up with martinis?
Yeah, with Martinis. Yeah, Martinis is a bar in New York. True Laurel is a bar in San Francisco.
Oh.
They were hosting Martinis, and they were actually doing a shochu pop up as well, which is like a
That
spirit
is
from
so
Japan.
cool. Okay.
It was cool. It was cool. I had this caprese salad cocktail. You know the salad with like the tomatoes and the cheese and the basil and the oil. That was really good.
Did you have any martinis?
No.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So that was last weekend. The following weekend, I'm so excited. My sister had her quince.
15.
That was super cool. It was very nice seeing my sister all dolled up like that. Typically I see her in sweats and baggy shirts.
All the 20 cases, 30 cases of Modelo.
No, we're not like that. We're not like that. The event was actually no alcohol. So
What?
as far as I know, there
15
was
with no alcohol.
because it was at a public spot.
Oh.
So as far as I know,
that makes
nobody was
sense.
drinking alcohol there. But plenty of drinks were drinking at the after party at my parents' house.
There you go,
By
there
a
you
lot of
go.
parties involved. So
The 30 cases of Modelo?
not Modelo.
Not Modelo. Okay.
You know. Oh, you know. What's our favorite drink?
Pacifico.
Pacifico. So what about you? What you been up to?
School, work, but also I went to Sequoia 2 days ago. I did this hike called Marble Falls. It's 6 miles, 3 miles in, 3 miles back. It's beautiful because I don't know if you guys know what marble is. It's a sort of limestone rock, but it's really cool because it's completely white.
Yeah.
So there was a huge marble deposit where the river comes through and forms a waterfall. So it's basically a waterfall
Sweet.
with white rocks all over it. It looks
Nice.
super luxurious. Yeah,
I bet.
yeah. Marble is also what people use for like their countertops and
Yeah.
their bathrooms and their kitchen, sculptures. It was
If
beautiful.
you go to Europe, a lot of places have like marble columns and stuff like that.
Oh,
It's
yeah. The
crazy.
whole
Those look crazy.
yeah. Lots of sculptures too in marble. That was like the primary, the preferred rock to sculpture.
Alrighty, so lead us into our discussion for today.
All
What
right,
what are we
guys.
going to be talking about?
I'm gonna be talking about a concept that blew my mind when I started learning about it. And it's free will.
What?
So
Free will.
I'm gonna open this topic up with one question. Do you think that you make your own choices, or do you think that your choices have already been predetermined?
Okay. Okay. So what do you mean by that?
There's two concepts here that we're gonna talk about, or like the two concepts to open up this topic is free will versus determinism. Free will is the idea that we make conscious, independent choices. Determinism is the belief that we don't, that most of our actions are predetermined by prior causes. A causes B, B causes C, C causes X, and Y, and D, and T, for example. Some of these influences could be your biology, your environment, your past experiences, etc.
So like your environment that you grew up in and stuff like that?
Yep.
Okay.
That's one
Cool,
of the
cool.
things we're gonna
Gotcha.
talk about that too. Why this topic matters, and I want to focus on three different things. Morality. Can we blame people for things they do if we are, running under the assumption that we have no free will? Second one is justice. How should legal systems, how should society punish those people who commit crime? And the third one is identity. If we don't make free choices, what does that mean for who we are? Like, what are we?
So what you're telling us is, in theory, this shakes up the fabric of humanity. If we do not have
it changes
free will.
up the fabric of our
Because not only does
conception
this
of
not only
behavior.
does this tear down our justice system, it tears down who we are as individuals, and it also tears down what we are well, not what we were supposed to do, but our morality, which is like
Yeah, our
our
ethics,
guidelines to
our
life.
guidelines to life.
which
Yes.
is very interesting.
Yeah. And like, I will say that this is a really hard topic to talk about because most people, including ourselves here, we have been raised under the preconception that free will exists. We're constantly told in society, if you do this, if you do that, you acquire this. If you work hard, if you do everything right, you will win. And winners will be winners because they worked hard, and losers are losers because they didn't work hard enough.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It's highly based on free will, and people love that idea.
And a large thing too is we were both raised pretty religious, and in religion,
Oh yeah.
your free will is a huge thing. You know, you're taught that um, God has
In
given
the
us
in
free
the in the
will.
book of Genesis within the Bible, when he talks about the Ten Commandments, I believe he introduces the idea that he has created humans with free
With
will.
free will, and so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, you're taught that we have free will and we can choose Him or not choose Him. But at the end of the day, He gave us that ability
The
to
ability to
choose.
choose, yes. Which I think we still have the ability to choose, but
Would you say like we have a
it's the
limited
mechanism
number of?
is the mechanism behind the choice.
We have a
Because yeah,
limited number of options that we're going to choose
we
realistically.
exactly,
Okay,
but whether we're gonna choose this option versus this one, there's a high probability that we'll choose one over the other.
gotcha.
That's the sort of idea. So I want to introduce you guys to Robert Sapolsky because he is one of the biggest proponents, modern proponents on the lack of free will, and he does that from a scientific, empirical perspective, which I really like. So he's a neuroscientist and a primatologist. He argues that free will is an illusion, that every action, thought, and decision is the result of prior causes, whether it's biology, neurochemistry, and external influences again. He believes that we must abandon the moral blame and rethink justice and personal responsibility based upon the fact that we can control our actions, but that we do not have free will.
So you're coming for us immediately.
Yes,
You're saying
yes.
that we can't control anything that happens because of
We
all these prior not circumstances, prior variables and factors.
to a
That
certain
we are the result of everything before us, and therefore we are going to be the same for people generations from now on.
Not necessarily that we're going to be the same, because there's also the idea of neurochemistry that when your brain is exposed to new information, it has the ability to rewire itself and make different decisions upon this new information.
Okay.
So we're in a constant state of change. But whether that decision to make the change comes from just out of nowhere spawning, or that decision is just the culmination of a thought and behavioral process that's been ongoing.
Okay.
It's interesting. It's
This
interesting.
is some
So
interesting stuff, Santi.
So one of the first things there, if we're gonna talk about free will or we're gonna talk behavior, we gotta talk about the root of behavior, which is your brain.
Uh-huh.
Your brain is that computer, right? So I'm gonna start with the idea that decisions arise from neurons firing in response to prior biological and environmental factors. Essentially, everything we do requires neurons firing. Whether I'm moving my fingers, speaking, listening to you, touching things, feeling things, thinking, it's all neurons firing within my brain. Brain cells sending electrical signals to communicate. So, I want to talk about the fact that we don't choose to be who we are, but it is our genes, our prenatal environment, and childhood, ancestral culture, religion, skin color, education, etc., that defines who you are.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that.
At a more biological level, it is important to understand that our brains are constructed by many factors, and most of these factors lay outside of our control.
So yeah.
And I'm gonna make a thought example for you. Think about the stuff that you like, whether you like jazz over rock, or vanilla over chocolate ice cream, or whether you like strawberries or not. Did you choose to like strawberries? No, you didn't. You just
Kind of
tasted
do.
strawberries at some point and you said, I think I like this. But you tasted spinach one day and you said, I don't think I like this. You didn't choose like, I'm just gonna like spinach. You just do. Like your brain already has a preference for it. Did you choose to like milk? Do you choose to be milk intolerant or not? No, that's just based on the fact that your ancestors they were agricultural societies that drank a lot of milk, so you're not lactose intolerant. Did you choose to play soccer or to like soccer over football or football over baseball? No, you didn't.
It's a bunch of factors that factor whether you do or not.
Do you choose the language you're speaking? Which, by the way, the language you speak also changes the way you solve problems and the way you perceive a lot of different things.
Like I think we've talked about this before. Do you think in Spanish?
I think in both English and Spanish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I couldn't think in Spanish. I think in English. I am bilingual, but I don't think in Spanish just because English is very much my
Yeah,
dominant language.
yeah. For me, I mean, I would say I default to thinking in English now because I'm surrounded by like English speakers.
Okay.
But if every time I visit Colombia, then my brain kind of
It
like
shifts
switches
over.
to Spanish.
Oh,
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
very
I
interesting.
do still count in Spanish.
Really?
Like when I'm counting money or anything else that I'm counting, I usually tend to count in Spanish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. So I want to show you guys evidence that we have collected, as you know, or like the scientists have collected over the idea that your brain changes or your brain chemistry changes your behavior. So there was this guy called Charles Whitman. Who was Charles Whitman?
So, quick
As
trigger warning: we are going to be talking about mass shootings, and we may flash some images about PET scans and stuff like that that show some, kind of sensitive things. Just want to make a disclaimer, okay?
So on August 1st of 1966, Charles Whitman, he was a former Marine and a university student. He carried out one of the deadliest mass shootings in US history. And that's a lot to say there.
Yeah.
He murdered his wife and mother before heading to the University of Texas at Austin, where he climbed a tower and killed 16 people, injuring 31 others before being shot by the police. We say what was unusual about his case, that he had no prior criminal record and he was described as an intelligent, disciplined, and hardworking human being. How does he decide to do that all of a sudden? Is that a decision that he made out of his free will? He just said, you know what, I feel like killing a bunch of people today, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do it. That doesn't sound very realistic.
It doesn't sound like him at all.
Yeah, it
It
doesn't sound
doesn't
like
sound like what he's described as.
exactly. It doesn't sound like something that a regular person would do. I mean, would you go and kill, you
No,
wouldn't just
I
do that all of
wouldn't
a
do that.
sudden,
No,
right?
no.
Me neither. So, in the months leading up to the massacre, he wrote in his journal about experiencing violent thoughts that felt uncontrollable. He even sought psychiatric help. He would report overwhelming aggression, but he at the end received no intervention. After he died, when they cut up his head and do the autopsy, and then they look at his brain with PET scans and all of these technological things that science has now, they realized that there was a tumor pressing against Whitman's amygdala. The amygdala is a part of one of the earliest parts of the brain to develop, and is responsible for impulse control as well as fight or flight reflex and a bunch of other instincts that we share with animals.
Yeah.
Many neuroscientists believe that this humor contributed to his impulsivity because a part of his brain couldn't work properly in order to like deconstruct or in order to stop those behaviors from happening.
Yeah. So I'm looking at it right now. He had a tumor in the diencephalon, which is the middle left side of your brain. He had a tumor in there, but it was pressing up against
Against his amygdala.
amygdala, which is what they're kind of attributing to his issues. That because it was pressing up against the amygdala, it led to an inability to control his emotions and actions.
Because it changed the way that his brain was set up, it changed the functioning of his brain, then he lost control. Or maybe he never had control to begin with, but we're going to get into that. So, the implications for free will in this case. So, if Whitman's actions were driven by a tumor altering his brain functioning, can we really say he acted upon his free will? Like, if he didn't have his tumor, do you think he would have gone and, did what he did?
Well, I would like to take the all parties happy, side, and be like, maybe, people that are healthy, excuse me, people that are healthy and fully capable, and in good health or whatever, maybe those people have free will. Maybe some people have more free will than others,
We will see.
because it's interesting to see, like, he was inhibited.
Like I was saying, this gentleman was inhibited and therefore didn't have full control over like his decisions. That's back to my point, which is I think some people may have more free will than others, just because they're in a better physical spot. That's kind of my opinion.
Some people may be in a better position to make decisions than others.
Yeah,
Like some people have either more knowledge, better experience, better past to make better decisions than other people do.
yeah, and like that's what we were just
some
talking
people,
about. The
some
hangriness.
people's brains have better capacities for decision making than others.
More
This
wrinkly.
is an extreme case, which more wrinkly, right? This is an extreme case which shows, it was really important for science because you cannot test that as an experiment. Like you can't just hit somebody's head and see how that changes their behavior. That is completely immoral. You cannot like
Not that, but
you
you can do.
cannot-
They do lesions.
they do lesions, yes,
Yeah.
but that's in usually rats or monkeys or
Yeah,
some
that
other
is true.
primates. You can never do that with a human. So this cases are really important for science because
Mm-hmm.
it's a really empirical sort of evidence-based idea that you change the brain functioning, you injure the brain, and it's gonna change the behavior. It's
Yeah.
almost
Changes
it's
who
almost
they are.
impossible for it not to change who you are.
Yeah.
If you damage certain parts of the brain that are mostly close with personality. Speaking of personality, now we're gonna talk about Phineas Gage.
Personality.
So Phineas Gage was this railroad foreman, this railroad worker, and he suffered a really, really bizarre accident while working with explosives inside a mine. A 3 foot long iron rod shot through his skull, like through his eye, and went through it. Right? It entered below his left eye, and it exited through the top of his head. What is crazy is that this guy actually survived.
Yeah.
And then there's pictures of it. I don't know if I want to post a picture of him. But we can
do the
post
PET scan.
yeah, the PET
scan. Yeah.
Yes.
That's a little bit more scientific.
So
But oddly enough, too, this isn't like super uncommon. Like now, this is a little triggering too. But I've seen a lot of cases in the ER. People try to kill themselves, and they put a gun in their mouth and they shoot, and the bullet exits their brain, and they are still alive.
they're still alive, yeah.
Because they completely miss all the vital spots of the brain to kill themselves.
Yep. So
So this isn't necessarily uncommon.
it's not uncommon, yeah. But before the accident, Gage was known as a responsible, hardworking, well-mannered. He was even a highly religious person. But guess what happened after the accident? Guess what happened after he blew his prefrontal cortex, his frontal cortex, which is the frontal part of your brain, which is highly responsible for impulse control, for your personality, creative thinking, lots of things.
I'm gonna guess that he was different.
Yeah, it completely changed his personality.
Good guess.
So in modern neuroscience, again, they attribute personality and the change of personality to the damage to his prefrontal cortex. This suggests that our sense of self and personality are deeply tied to your brain structure rather than products of free choice. Again, you're testing that from an empirical point of view.
Yeah.
If we had the free will to choose who we are, if we had the free will to choose our personality, then damaging that part of the brain wouldn't really play a role in your personality. But guess what? It does.
Yeah.
Your brain is the center machine of your whole being.
Which is really cool because
So
it shows, feeds right into your point.
exactly. So if a single physical injury can transform decision making, how much control do we really think we have, guys? If a brain tumor can alter more reasoning, or getting your prefrontal cortex blown by a freaking rod, what about influences that are more subtle and we cannot perceive, like hormones of stress?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have your brain doesn't have to be impaled by a 3.5 foot rod for you to change your personality or change your decision
I
making.
mean, we see it all the time at work. We see people under the influence constantly making dumb, stupid decisions.
There you go. What
Just
is
because they're hindered with a little bit of with a substance that'll literally be out of their system in like 24 hours.
Yep.
Or for the most
And
part, I mean, 2
that's
days.
that's
2
an
days, 48
endogenous
hours.
that's an endogenous substances. In psychology and in science, you call all of those like alcohol, drugs, marijuana, all of this substances, we call them endogenous substances, which alter the neurochemistry of your brain, and therefore they alter your decision making. So, my next point that I want to talk about is even simple things like hunger affect decision making. And this is a really, really interesting study, which is called Strenuous Factors in Judicial Decisions. This was a study, it was done in Israel, I believe. And the study analyzed 1,112 parole board decisions made by 8 judges in Israel over the period of 10 months. So judges began their day granting parole to around 65% of applicants at the very beginning of the day. But they became increasingly strict as the morning progressed, dropping to nearly 0 just before lunch.
Okay, this is crazy. Actually, that's so cruel.
Okay, so check this out. Why do you think would be the biggest determining factor into you going up to the judge and telling them I messed up, I'm sorry, I mean can I have another chance,
I
I've been
think
doing
it
good.
should be that I think it should be their education and
should
like
be
their
their
morality.
training, their 10 years plus in
Yeah.
order to
It
become a judge, their
shouldn't be
20
how
years of
freaking
experience.
hungry they are. That's crazy.
Exactly. And guess what happens? After lunch, parole approvals shot back to around 65%,
Holy cow.
only to decline again as the session wore on. Why does this happen? The study would suggest that it's decision fatigue as a key factor. So making repeated decisions, just person after person after person after person, it depletes your mental energy, leading judges to default to the easiest and safest choice, which is saying, no, you messed up. I'm not letting you off the leash or off the hook, sorry.
I can kind of attest to this too, because like I'll be at work sometimes and I'll early the shifts when I'm less hungry. Somebody asks
You're
me
not
to-
hungry. You're
Yeah.
hangry.
Somebody asked me to, can you make this? Give me, surprise me with a drink, and I'll be like, oh yeah, here's this, and give them options. End of the night when it's like 12:30, they'll be like, surprise me. I'm like, bro, just choose a freaking drink. It's 12:30. Just choose a drink.
Exactly.
Like,
I'm not gonna make any special stuff for
I'm
you,
not gonna
man.
do mental gymnastics just to please you for your last drink of the night that you're not even gonna remember. If I'm being honest.
Yep.
So,
Yep. You can't even taste the alcohol after all the
Yeah.
alcohol you've had priorly. Point being, and then I'm gonna talk about the biology of eating. So after a break meal, blood glucose levels are restored, improving cognitive function and making judges more willingly to engage in complex decision making. So you're saying that the glucose within your blood that gets filtered through your whole system, including your brain, it gives your brain a better decision and a better way to engage in complex decision making. Just by eating.
that's just food. That's just consuming
and I gotta say,
calories.
if hunger and fatigue, factors that are completely outside of of your control, you don't really control if you're hungry or not. I mean,
can't-
you can by eating, but once you eat, you're gonna get hungry again. That's something you can't control
yeah,
unless
but
you keep
you
eating.
can't control feeling hungry.
You cannot control.
You can't
feeling
control
hungry.
that feeling
and
coming on.
and it's really also hard to control the biological neurochemical effects of hunger.
Which is fatigue.
Yes. So, judges who are highly trained to be impartial and irrational, still fall victims of the biological wiring of their brains.
Yeah, this is so crazy. I'll be honest. I don't feel like this is very ethical because this is kind of playing with people's lives.
Completely not, but
How many-
I mean,
it's a
and we're gonna talk
1200?
about the justice system in a bit.
1,100 parole board decisions.
So-
That's really insane.
I know that's a massive sample size. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they got the numbers. Right?
Yeah.
They got some evidence here.
So this aligns with Sapolsky's argument, which is that our decisions are not freely made. They're a biological and environmental result of actions and things outside of our control. Most decisions that you make are.
You're turning me. It's changing me.
So, if something as trivial as lunch can affect justice, how can we claim that judicial decisions are purely rational? And this is not for judges. This is for an everyday person. I mean, think about
Everybody.
it. Think about the things that can alter your perception, your decision making. Did you sleep good last night? Did you drink last night? Did you not drink last night? Do you exercise on a daily basis? Do you not exercise on a daily basis? What kind of food do you eat? Do you eat food that's highly rich on sugar? Do you eat food that's highly rich on actual nutrients? And even, taking it back a week, right? What did you eat last week? Did you exercise last week? 6 months from now, what were you doing 6 months ago? Don't really
Sorry,
think about
sorry.
what you were doing 6 months ago. It wasn't a question for you, I guess. But now, 10 years ago, for us who are in our 20s, while you were growing, while you were developing, right? What was the environment of your development? Were you bullied in high school? Were you the bully in high school? Did you have a big friend group in high school? Did you not? Take that 20 years down the line, when you were a baby. Was your mom a smoker? Was your mom a drinker? Was she not? I mean, did your mom help you walk and then she gave you the freedom so you could walk? Because one of the things there is that walking and the independent walking that your mom will allow you,
The sooner you walk, right?
the sooner you walk, but then the sooner you walk is also correlated with like whether your mom actually is like making you want to walk or making you walk. That is highly correlated with cognitive development, with
Yeah.
cognitive functioning. Babies that walk a little sooner and that are let independently walk by their parents, that influences your cognition. the development of your brain.
So basically, to
And then-
sum it all up, all of these, like, he's kind of racking my brain talking to me about, or talking to us about, what were you doing last week? What were you doing 4 months ago? What were you doing 10 years ago? There
And
are
you
so
can take that thousands of years ago.
yeah, and there's so many factors in an individual's life that dictate what you do and how you act, and that's just within the scope of our lives. And now you're talking about, what did your mom do during her life that led her to lead to the decision she made while she was having you?
What was the ancestral culture where you come from?
Yeah,
Because every culture has developed their own like morality and moral standards and ways of behaving and ways of
humanity
acting.
too. What are the conditions of the weather like where you grew up? What are the conditions of the weather where your ancestors grew up? How does that dictate how they act, how they behave? Yeah, that's like
Exactly. The broader aspect of culture that
what
actually influences your behavior way more than you would think.
What are finances like? Because I know that, like, what was I listened to in the podcast? It said, like, if your mom is tighter during if your mom is tight on money during X trimester of the pregnancy, she's gonna have higher stress hormones, which is gonna lead to you being like a leaner, like lighter baby.
Stress
and stuff
hormones are massive, like cortisol and all these hormones that are shared with you as a baby.
Those factors are completely out of your control.
Completely out of your control.
You can't do anything.
Most factors, I would say, are completely outside of your control.
Yeah. It's hard to relinquish that.
Do you choose the people that you meet? Do you choose the friends you're around? I mean, I guess you do if you like him enough for them to be your friend. But how do you choose what kind of people you like and what kind of people you don't like? You just like certain people based on the fact that you might have some sort of like cultural resemblance. You speak the same language. This person shares a lot of the same moral values with you. But why do they share the same moral values? Did they choose those moral values? Were those moral values assigned to them? Did you choose them, or you assigned to you?
One thing I think about often is, like, how you're given like seating charts in high school.
Yep.
Typically, that dictates who your friends are, right? Whatever group or like foursome or sixsome you're like bunched up to next to, that's usually who you end up being friends with. That year, that maybe even in high school sometimes, and it's so crazy to think that something completely out of your control. Maybe the bias of the teacher putting all the people with the same last name, or all the same people with the same, cultural last name together. Maybe her bias has an effect on you and your friendships and your livelihood. And it's crazy to think about. And, maybe those friends, maybe you do end up staying friends with them. And maybe, they stay in your life throughout your whole life. Maybe they're your best man, or maybe it ends up being your boyfriend or your girlfriend or whatever later in life. Who knows? All these factors, there's just...
And the more you think about it, exactly. The more you think about it, the more mind blowing you're gonna be.
Yeah.
This guides me to my next point: criminal justice and moral responsibility.
Oh man.
Because once you establish whether you passively or actively accept that we humans, we don't have free will, or that we are not as free as we think, once you establish that, you have to think about the consequences, the implications on the lack of free will.
Mm-hmm.
How would that affect society? How would that affect our behavior, our decision making, the way our culture works? I want to focus on the criminal justice system, because if free will does not exist, can we truly blame criminals? Can we treat criminals as evil people? Should we? Is it morally acceptable for us to say that they're beyond being human, that they're a criminal, that they're bad people? Should we focus, perhaps, on rehabilitation instead of punishment? Some legal systems, like Norway's criminal system, they already accept this notion. And this is another case study, the Norway's justice system. So Norway's legal system is built on the idea that criminals are not inherently evil or bad, but they're rather, guess what? Shaped by their environment, by their genetics, by their childhood, by the people they hang around with. They say that childhood experiences and social conditions will provoke a certain behavior, will elicit a certain behavior. So instead of focusing on retribution, like you're going to rot in jail and we're going to punish you and we're going to make you miserable and we're going to strip you of your humanity, Norway prioritizes rehabilitation, aiming to reintegrate these offenders into society as functional, not violent citizens.
So a little bit of statistics to back that up. Norway has a low crime rate and is considered one of the safest countries in the world. I'm just citing Google. In 2022, Norway's crime rate was 56.1 reported crimes per 1,000 people. So that's really, really low. In 2023, Norway had 40 murders, which is a murder rate of 0.72 per 100,000 people. So really low. But here's some other factors. Norway's low crime rate may be due to its small population size and homogeneity. And Norway is both a source and destination country for arms trafficking, but the market is small. So although it's a small country with not a lot of foot traffic or market traffic,
The philosophy
there's got to
behind
be
their
other
criminal system.
there's got to be other factors that keep crime low. And I know there's the picture
But
that always floats around of the prison cell where it looks like a nice room. It looks like a dorm room here in the U.S.
Oh yeah. It looks like it looks
It's-
better
it's-
than some college dorm rooms.
it's
What they
posh
have in
in
Norway.
there. It's
Yes,
pretty.
it's nice. But here's the thing, and this is a really interesting analogy. Let's say you have kids. Your kid is sick, so you decide I'm not gonna send you to school because you're sick. You don't want to get other kids sick. You don't want to affect the health of other kids.
Reasonable.
Do you trap him in his room and take away all of his toys, and you make him wear a rope and like? You don't take him out and you feed him through a freaking you open the door, you feed him and you close the door. No, the kid is
No.
still at home,
I
allowed
know
to
where you're
use his toys and allowed to get better, right?
Yeah.
It's a
'Cause
very
it's about
similar.
feeling better
It's
to
it's
get
a very
better.
similar metaphor to Norway's criminal system.
Versus like what you were saying, like feeding him through the door versus the U.S. prison system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this approach rejects the concept of moral blame under the idea that we humans are not as free as we think we are, and assumes that crime is a symptom of social and psychological conditions that need to be addressed. So by changing the environment in which you have people, by changing the same structure of the environment, you're going to change their behavior. That's the whole point. And I really like that they use human dignity as a core principle. This means that inmates are treated as humans first and criminals second. Versus the U.S. system where you're a criminal and you're going to be labeled a
You're
criminal
marked a criminal. You're
forever.
marked a criminal for life. You know.
And then this also affects the idea that as an inmate or as a free person, you make choices, but how much of those choices are, inside your control. So within the whole idea of Norway's prison system, they focus on education, vocational training, therapy. The guards act as mentors rather than enforcers, building relationships with inmates. Inmates wear normal clothes, not prison uniforms, reinforcing self-worth. Now let's talk about the U.S. system. The U.S. system focuses on, like most systems around the world, they focus on punishment, insulation, and deterrence, which often leads to dehumanization.
Yeah.
Which is
But
interesting.
The
like,
U.S. has
you
a really
have-
bad problem with dehumanization because I mean, the way we talk
100%.
about like,
I know the way you talk about
prisoners,
immigrants
the way
or
you talk
like
about immigrants,
outsiders, people with
homeless
other skin
people
color.
too. It's crazy. That's like such a big issue here.
That is a really big issue. But the thing there, and this is where statistics will back this up, is the high recidivism rate. Recidivism is the word that you use for criminals that are released from jail and they end up coming back eventually.
Reoffenders, yeah.
Reoffenders. So this suggests that punitive measures do not address the root of causes of crime. Why? Because Norway boasts one of the lowest levels of criminals coming back to jail, recidivism, rates in the world are only around 20% within 5 years. Only 20%, over the period of 5 years, people that get released end up going back to jail. Now let's talk about the U.S. How many of these people leave jail and end up coming back? 76.6% within 5 years.
That's almost 4 times worse.
What I get from that is that in the U.S., you're a criminal, you get sent to jail, you walk out of jail being a worse criminal. Because now you've been around criminals.
Well, also it's
You walk out of jail being trained on how to be a criminal.
Yeah, it also is attributed to what happens in jail. Like in Norway, they're taught how to get better. In the U.S., they're kind of just locked away, kept away from society. And what that ends up happening is it leads people in Norway to a path of growth. But in the U.S., you're already down here.
but you get out of prison and you're still kind of down here.
Yeah, you
So now
can't
have
you
to-
can't even work at
You have
McDonald's.
to try to like pick yourself up by your bootstraps and see what you can do to get by. And a lot of people end up turning to the bad things again. To try
Exactly.
to get by.
So if the environment plays such a major role in determining behavior, changing the environment rather than punishing individuals would produce a better societal outcome. Now, here's another really interesting statistic. Most of the prisoners within the US system, they come from lower socioeconomical levels.
Yeah.
You think that if we all have free will, then the statistical distribution of wealth in prison would be somewhat equal. The wealthiest people are in jail, then people middle class go to jail, poor people also go to jail, lower socioeconomic levels. But no, most of the people that you see in the criminal system are people that come from really messed up backgrounds.
Yeah. And there's so many there's so many factors that go into that, obviously, but that is very significant in and of itself because it does show that like there's a correlation there, and that is low socioeconomic status,
Socioeconomic
SES,
status, yes,
SES,
100%.
and high population.
Next,
and
next thing. If criminals had absolute free will, we would expect prison conditions. Whether you have Norway's system of like treating them as humans and focusing on rehabilitation versus the U.S., which dehumanizes them, you would expect both conditions to have very little effect on the amount of people that end up going back to jail. If everyone just had their free will. Like if I have free will, whether you're telling me, whether you're helping me, whether I'm going to therapy or not, that's not going to change a thing. Because if I have the free will to be a criminal and I choose to be a criminal or I don't, I still do or I still don't. But it doesn't necessarily work that way.
Yeah.
If crime were a matter of pure choice, punishment should deter crime. But it doesn't.
Yeah.
This suggests that behavior is largely dictated by external factors rather than personal willpower. And if you account for all the external factors, then let's think about internal factors again. What's your blood sugar level?
Yeah.
Did you eat last
How hungry
night?
are
Are you
you?
going through a divorce? How hungry are you? Was your mom good? Did your mom abuse you? Were you
Was your
abused during
mom
your
good?
childhood? I'm serious.
No,
I mean,
yeah.
it sounds kind of Freudian, but it's
Yeah.
not. It's not. It's very scientifically based.
No, it's totally fair because even people like us, where it's like, I talk to other people, just in the world, people like you and me, we would never even consider doing anything that would put us in a compromising situation to where we break the law, right? But that's, you look at our family scope. No, nobody in our families have really ever done anything like that. But then
Your
you look
family
at-
doesn't live in the hood either. Like,
Yeah.
your family lives within a regular middle class household where
Exactly, but then you look at other communities and other families where it's like they talk about stuff so
Exactly.
casually and stuff that they've done already, and it's like that's the culture there that's already ingrained into who they are and their family.
Exactly.
culture.
Now, you
But
talk
where it's more accepted and okay. Now it's a matter of like, what can I do to get away with it?
Yep.
Not what can I do to do it.
What role models did you have growing up?
Yeah.
Did you have your mom and dad that graduated college and they tell you you need to get an education? We'll help you get an education. We're always here. We're
Did
going to
you have your
mentor
mom
you.
and dad in general?
Did you have your mom and dad in general? There you
Yeah.
go. Or did you have, I don't know, your mom who perhaps, have criminal problems, perhaps a drug addict, your dad perhaps an alcoholic, your cousins, your uncles perhaps in prison? How was that environment growing up that either gave you the equipment or not to make better decisions in life? What decisions do you have available?
There is so much at stake with all of this. It's really crazy.
So, let's talk about moral responsibility in the context of free will. If we abandon the idea of free will, we must rethink justice, not as a means of retribution, but as a way to change the same conditions that produce criminal behavior. You can't change people's genetics. You can't. It's, it's, I guess we've tried in science to change some of the expression of genes, but there's so much that we don't know. You can't change that. But what we could really try to mitigate is the effect that the environment has on behavioral patterns.
I do think
It's really hard to do, especially living in the U.S. where you have right now one of the worst distributions of wealth ever in history. I mean, we're
crazy.
the distribution of wealth in the U.S. right now, it's kind of like the distribution of wealth in France before the French Revolution. I'm serious. It's horrible. Like
It's scary to look
in
at.
the US, you have environments where you're all the way up here, and like you're for sure gonna go to college. You're getting your college paid for, and driving a BMW when you graduate high school. But you also have people down here.
Where it's like you don't even know if you're going to eat next.
Exactly.
You don't even know where your next meal is coming from. You don't even know if you're going to be alive tomorrow. Stuff like that.
Those are environments that you didn't choose. Like it's almost a lottery. So, holding a mirror up to the idea of prisoners not being considered criminals because they have no control over it, let's hold a mirror up to that idea. I'm an amazing student. I have straight A's. I must be so good. I'm so working. I work so hard. I'm so smart. No, you're not. You're not.
You have
You're in
to
an
self-reflect.
environment. You're in an environment that allows your cognition to succeed because your parents taught you mathematics, because you went to really good schools, because your parents while you were pregnant, your parents actually worried about the development of the embryo, so they actually ate proper food and relaxed and took it easy. You didn't have any traumatic brain injuries. You had an amazing childhood. Maybe you didn't. If we cannot blame people for doing evil things, then I don't think that we should give retribution or give praise for the people that are doing amazing things. Just like the criminals, the very successful people, are also a result of their immediate environment and genetics and etc. I know the lack of free will and the idea that we lack free will has insane repercussions in society and in
It's
the
a
way we
lot to
perceive
wrap
people.
our minds around for
Yes.
sure.
So, mental health and personal growth. If we have no free will, are we just passengers in our own lives? I mean, think about it. Try to close your eyes for a second, or don't. But what do you feel? There's, you know, inside my brain, inside this body, there is something. There is something there that feels pain, that feels excitement, that feels joy. Whether that pain, excitement, or joy is caused by you or external factors, you can still feel it. And we should nourish that.
Do you see me like just? Do you see me?
Yeah.
You see it in my eyes.
Yeah. I gotta zoom into
You're like
into
tapping.
your expression.
You're like tapping into me right now. Hold on, my bad.
No, you're good. You're
It's not
good.
bad.
So understanding determinism, aka the lack of free will, it has a lot of really good effects in society, but one of them, it should make us more compassionate. Compassion is the big driving tool of humans. Is me saying, I'm here sitting in my BMW and I'm watching that homeless person look inside the garbage, and you say, "Oh, it's so disgusting." But try to put yourself in that homeless person's shoes. If you were in his shoes, you'd be probably doing the same thing that he's doing. Try to have some compassion for the people around you. Don't see them as just criminals or as bad people. See them as victims
Yeah.
of the higher structure around you. Compassion. Instead of blaming people or ourselves, we should seek to change the circumstances that lead to a certain behavior. Now, a big misconception on the idea that we lack free will is that if I had no free will, if I have no control, why would I go to therapy? Why would I try to better myself? Why would I try to make better decisions if at the end of the day, I'm completely outside of control? Yes, but no, because can therapy help you if behavior is already predetermined? I would say so. I would say it can, because new experiences reshape the brain, creating new behavioral patterns. This is the idea of neuroplasticity. It's the idea that your neurons can actually rewire themselves and change within your brain upon new information. So can I go to therapy? Should I go to therapy if I have no free will? Yes, you should, because therapy or any sort of help is going to provide your brain with the instructions and the blueprint towards changing behavior. The idea that we have no free will and that it's already predetermined doesn't mean that we cannot change. Whether that decision is just, no decision happens in a flash. No decision
No.
happens like this. If I went to therapy and I decided to change or I didn't decide to change, It's because your brain is trying to be reprogrammed with the idea of changing, with the idea of making different decisions.
And I think Santi agrees with this. Will agree with me on this one, but I think everybody should go to therapy. I think no matter who you are, I think everybody should go to therapy because even if you're not mentally ill or even if you're not struggling with anything, I think therapy is always a good outlet for, even if it's just going to someone regularly to talk to about your feelings or experiences or about what you're going through. Some people don't feel comfortable with their friends or family doing that. Even a therapist is a very good outlet for stuff like that.
I feel that everyone in society should have a learning mentality. Because again, I talked about neuroplasticity.
So many people are closed off.
Upon new information, your brain now has more choices. And notice how I'm not saying your brain, this right here.
Yeah.
You're reprogramming your brain with new information, which gives you better access to choices. Everyone should know about psychology. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be a psychologist, but learn about it. Why? Because psychology, the idea of psychology, provides you with a blueprint with tools to better understand yourself. Everyone should learn about philosophy. Why? Because philosophy gives you the blueprint and the tools to understand the world. New information can change new wiring in your brain, which can therefore change behavioral patterns, the way you perceive the world. What do you think, Gabe?
I'm thinking a lot right now.
I know it's a lot to think about.
You got me going.
I sit, and this is interesting because most of what I'm saying, whether it doesn't really come from my brain. I'm not that smart. This is Robert Sapolsky's perspective, and he says,
yeah, but you have your own thoughts.
Of course. But
you are
he says that he can only he says that he can only operate under the idea of free will for about 7 minutes.
Whoa.
Because
What an interesting-
or the lack of free will for about 7 minutes. Why? Because you start thinking about all these things like, oh well, criminals, and then like my mom and dad, and like how religion has shaped me, and like there's so many factors outside of your control that you really have to like take pauses and breaks before you think about free will or the lack of free will.
You will
again.
go crazy.
It is, especially because we live in a society again that has wired us to think that free will exists. So whether you choose to believe that free will exists or it doesn't is not necessarily your choice. It's a dichotomy. Yeah, you've been taught and trained to believe that free will exists and to take that for granted. If you've made it to this far in the podcast, now you have received new information, new blueprints that can rewire your brain to think the opposite.
Yeah. We have a new scope.
Whether you choose to believe that what I'm saying makes sense or I'm just bluffing, are you choosing that?
What reason do we have to lie to you guys?
What is more powerful right now in your mind to think that you have free will or not? What I'm saying or the tons of decades of conditioning and training from society telling you that you do have free will? What's gonna be a bigger power there? Your open-mindedness, which is a trait in psychology, which allows you to, understand new information and be open to change. Are you an open-minded person or are you more of a closed-minded person? That will determine whether you believe in free will or not, whether you believe that you want to change your mind or not. It's not just your conscious decision. It's who you are.
It's a lot.
That is a lot.
Do you want to cover the first four of these closing thoughts, and I'll cover the last one?
Sounds good. Yeah, well, let's get to closing thoughts after all of this. So, this are a few things that we're not going to respond. We want you guys to think about that. So,
feel free to reach out to us or comment about what are some of your thoughts on some of these closing thoughts. We'd love to hear your guys' opinions.
We would love to hear your guys'
that's really
opinions.
interesting.
That is really interesting. The idea of I'm gonna say this before we get into this, that this whole idea of the lack of free will has really taken more meaning and power as science has developed itself. Like 100 years ago, we couldn't have measured Phineas Gage injury to say oh well, the changes in his brain has
We wouldn't
changed
have
his
understood
behavior.
the implications.
We wouldn't have understood the implications. So the idea of determinism, it's old. It's as old. The idea of the lack of free will is just as old as the idea of free will. But now we're having empirical data and evidence that would suggest otherwise. That would suggest that we don't have it. So first, the illusion of choice. We like to believe that we're in control of our own lives, but as we've seen from neurological cases, studies to judicial biases, our decisions are shaped by factors we rarely notice. If even something as small as hunger can alter a judge's ruling, how much of our daily lives are really ours to control?
It's so funny reading these every
Your
time because
your
it's
your
like
brain
crap.
your brain has been marinating on all of these hormones and neurotransmitters and experiences constantly. Whether you didn't get enough sleep, whether you did, whether you're eating a lot of sugar, whether you're not, whether you're having a lot of carbs, all of these things affect your behavior, affect your cognition. Second, crime and punishment. If crime is a product of biology and environment rather than evil or bad choices, then our justice system needs to reflect that reality. Norway's model shows, empirically with evidence, that when we treat offenders as products of their circumstances rather than evil villains, we actually reduce crime. So, why do we still insist in punishing and labeling people for mistakes that they have made outside of their power? Why? Why do we focus on punish rather than rehabilitation?
Maybe capitalism. Maybe
I think it's something
to keep the poor
before,
poor and
yeah,
the rich richer.
before capitalism,
That
because
is an
the
idea.
prison system has existed for a long time, and
Yeah.
a big history of the prison system started actually in England. When I went to
But now in the U.S., there's a lot of private
yeah,
prisons, which
yeah,
are
it is,
big.
it
There are
is.
a lot of reasons
Yeah,
why some
I
people are rich.
I learned quite a bit about the history of the prison system when I went to England, and I went to like one of the old castles in Oxford that it was a castle and it got turned into a prison. This is sort of outside of the topic, but you learn a lot about how prisons used to be private businesses.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a bunch of them here. In the
There's a
US,
bunch.
so
Yeah, that's the other thing about the U.S.
they've been passed down from
Capitalism,
family to family to family.
capitalism.
It's an idea. It's not
but
the answer,
they
but it's
they
an
make
idea.
money off of the prison system. They get government funding to put all of these people in jail. What happens if we start rethinking the model of justice and if we
All of a
start
sudden, a bunch of
focusing on
people are not
rehabilitation? What happens with the money that goes into the prison system? All the people that work there, blah 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 blah. Again, the repercussions of the lack of free will are massive. Third, who are we without free will? If our personalities and actions are determined by brain chemistry and external conditions, then who or what are we really? Are we just complex machines following a script of biology and experience? And if so, can we learn to live with that truth?
You damn
Will we
existentialist.
ever be comfortable with that truth?
Everything comes back to existentialism with you, huh?
Ah, okay. This is really interesting. This is why the lack of free will blew my mind because philosophically, I align myself with existentialism, but the lack of free will completely destroys that idea because in existentialism, the premise of it is that existence precedes essence. One must come into reality, what must come into existence, and define oneself with the freedom that that each person has.
Yeah, that's
That
memorized.
we humans, we are freedom based on the existentialist philosophy, right? But the lack of free will completely destroys that because me as a human, I no longer come to Earth and define myself with my own freedom. Me as a human, I come myself, and I come, and before I even come out of my mom's womb, there's already influences that are dictating who
you're
I
gonna
can be and who I
yeah.
can't. Again, existentialism was something that was born in like the late 1800s before we had all of this new information and new technology in order to, discover what we have discovered.
I need really
So,
drinking.
fourth, the weight of determinism, is it a comfort or a challenge? The weight on the lack of free will, is that comforting for you or is it a challenging idea? Is it going to cause an existential crisis? We'll see. So some may find the idea of determinism unsettling, while others might see it as liberating. If we are not fully responsible for our worst moments, then perhaps we should also learn how to forgive ourselves and forgive other people more easily. The weight of your own mistakes. This idea of the lack of free will, cut yourself a break, man.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't completely your fault. Maybe you're not hungry. You were hangry, and that's why you yelled at your wife, and that's why she left.
Okay.
I'm serious. Like
That's a
most
great example.
decisions and mistakes that you're making in life, again, your brain's been marinating in all of this, substances and things within your body that change your perception and change your action.
All right. So on to
But
the
if we're
next. Oh,
sorry, one more thing. But if we're not truly choosing our paths, what does that mean for personal responsibility? How responsible are you of your own decisions?
Yeah.
Think about that.
you got to hold yourself accountable. So on to the next one. Implications for mental health. So if free will is an illusion, what does that mean for mental health? Are people with anxiety, depression, or addiction just victims of brain chemistry and past experiences? And if so, shouldn't our focus be on support and treatment rather than the blame? This ties back to the whole Norwegian prison system, um, treating them as people first, as criminals second, and working on helping them grow and shaping them into better humans instead of like punishing them for who they are or who they don't even choose to be.
Which is interesting because I find a dichotomy there, like opposing, like a double standard, opposing features, because we treat criminals as criminals, and based on the idea of lack of free will, the criminal, just like the person with anxiety or depression, is somebody whose brain chemistry and brain is working differently
Yeah.
than the regular person.
I mean, everybody
But
sees.
but we see people with depression and anxiety, and we say you have to reach therapy. We take it easy on them. It's like it's not your fault. Your brain just lacks like serotonin and certain neurotransmitters that would affect your mood.
Uh-huh.
Same thing with criminals.
Yeah.
Your
And-
brain works slightly differently, and the choices that you've been given in life are not the best.
And it ties into the ethics of knowing all this. So
Yep.
now that we understand how little control we have, what do we do with this knowledge? Do we push for a more compassionate society, one that acknowledges the limits of personal responsibility, or do we struggle against these implications, clinging to the comforting myth of free will? So
That's
let's let you guys just sit with that for a second.
yeah. Sit with that. How does free will make us perhaps more compassionate, ethical humans? Or how does the lack of free will make us more compassionate and ethical humans? How does that change the way we perceive not only ourselves, but the world outside of us?
So then that leads into, is free will just a useful illusion? Even if we don't have free will, maybe we need to act as if we do.
Yep.
Society runs on the belief that people are responsible for their actions. Can we balance determinism with the need for accountability? Or do we need an entirely new way of thinking about morality and justice?
That is a really good question. Because,
You wrote
again,
it.
as an existentialist, I choose what I want to believe or not.
Yeah.
I'm highly convinced on the idea that we don't have free will, but maybe I want to think, hopefully, that we do have some sort of control. Just because I don't want to feel that I'm just this being trapped inside my brain.
So that'll drive us home with our last question. If not free will, then what? If free will isn't real, then what truly drives human behavior? Science tells us it's biology and environment, but does that mean everything is already written? Or do we still have some room, however small, to influence our own paths?
I feel that we're writing things as we go, but it's not me who's writing that with the hypothetical hand of free will. Is my brain writing that with a hypothetical lack of hand for the lack of free will.
I said this earlier in the week to you. Maybe we're not fully evolved as a species yet, and maybe we don't have full free will. Like you were mentioning earlier, that Sapolsky said that we can do 7 minutes of free will before you lose your mind. Maybe we're just not, because we came from Homo erectus. That's not us, right? We're Homo sapiens.
Or
Yeah.
Homo sapiens.
So Homo erectus were the first bipedals, primates that we were, or whatever. So back then, I mean, we couldn't even think past like food. We couldn't have those like stream of thoughts and consciousness
Which in
that we do now.
in
So
science,
maybe we're not there yet, but
Yeah.
maybe we will be in the millennia. Who knows?
yeah, if we continue to evolve. I mean, right now there's really no evidence that would suggest that we have been evolving for the past who knows how many hundreds of years or beyond that. But what's 500 years for a universe that's been around for freaking billions of years?
Yeah. And I mean, there's technological advances happening
There
all
are
the time.
technological advances.
One of the things I wanted to mention is the Microsoft just literally yesterday this came out. Microsoft's Majorana chip. So this is freaking crazy. It is a quantum chip. So this kind of blows my mind because the way it works is, in theory, if this were like this has been developed, it's not fully completed yet. Like this is like the engine of a car. This is the whole working functional car. But the way this works is like, have you guys seen like those sci-fi movies where people get cuts, or like there's androids or robots that get cuts or gashes or whatever, and it just starts healing on its own, or like nanotechnology where it like fuses on its own together. That's where this comes into play. This stuff is
Okay.
meant for that, like self-healing,
So like the reconstruction, so the
stuff.
reconstruction
And
of
also,
cells
like,
within your body that aids healing.
that, but also as well as like programs, it running programs that are able to solve stuff, like it running millions and millions of simulations and just pumping out the right one that works this time without having to trial and error it like how humans have to do now. This does all of that work for you, which is crazy to think
Interesting.
that we just came across this. This was published the 19th, which was 3 days ago. Isn't that freaking insane?
That is insane. Yeah, I didn't even know about that, but that is insane. It's interesting, like being born now that we have
It's a matter of time.
there's
before
like
it's
there's like
monetized.
possibility that all these things can be true, right? And we're discovering that this is possible. Imagine being born 100, 200 years from now.
Yeah.
How that's gonna change perspective and just humanity. It's so interesting. It's a booming in every manner imaginable.
Yeah. It's unreal.
Lastly, I would say thank you for using your free will for tuning into us or your
Okay.
lack thereof.
It's like you didn't
And,
have a choice.
and one more thing is that you will never be able to experience everything. So please do poetical justice to your soul and simply experience yourself. This is a quote by Albert Camus. So let that sentient part of yourself experience all of the beautiful emotions and ups and downs that your brain produces.
Yeah.
Allow yourself to enjoy the lack of free will.
So let's wrap up today. You got anything interesting? You got our MMM for us today?
I don't have an M&M. I mean, my MMM is watching a bunch of podcasts that Robert Sapolsky has done,
This guy
so I
made
can
us do
get the
freaking
information.
homework this weekend. He sent like us 4 podcasts and 6 YouTube videos. I was like, good lord. But I did come prepared. I came prepared knowing how to talk about this
Good,
stuff.
good.
so-
I've been preparing for this for a while now. The idea of the pondering of
This is
the
years
lack
in
of
the
free
making.
will. Yes, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I think that's where I stand now. I stand on the lack of free will, unfortunately, even though it hurts my existentialist mind to think about that.
So my MMM is I'm gonna make Santi zoom
here
in
we
on this.
go.
My MMM is gonna be my Pokemon pack for the day. Let me see if I
Get
can.
it, get it closer, get it closer.
Okay, so I'm gonna make him zoom in on this.
My Pokemon pack.
I've been getting some hits lately. Okay, so let's see. Is there anything? Oh, there's nothing in here. It's so annoying. Okay, there's nothing.
What is a Pokemon pack?
You never played Pokemon cards before?
No,
Never?
no.
You're 23. You've lived in the U.S. since 2017. You've never touched Pokemon before?
I think maybe somebody
Pokemon
else's phone,
cards.
but no.
You've never seen the physical game?
No, maybe I have, but I mean, I know Pokemon cards are collectible and they can go for
It's just-
thousands of
it's-
dollars.
Yeah, they're just like it's like there's like an online TCG like trading card game system now. So
Oh, so you trade cards online
You can
with
trade,
your
you
friends from
collect.
China?
yeah, I battle all the time. I'm goaded. If you guys want to battle me,
You say I'm
send me your
goated.
friend code. I'll destroy you.
If you guys want to use your free will to battle him,
it's gonna be against your will when you lose.
there you go.
Alrighty. We want to once again thank you guys for listening, and we appreciate it as always.
We do. For our 10 viewers, we do everything for you. We love you.
Love you guys. Have a good rest of your day.